The strongest cord in your leg can snap in an instant when ambition outpaces biology and the body loses its final warning signal. One desperate step for a ball already gone can load the knee beyond limits evolution never intended. Every fiber is pulling against momentum, while the body desperately tries to stop itself from flying forward. Eccentric contraction creates a hidden tug of war, where strength itself becomes the source of destruction. The tendon stretches past elasticity and enters a zone where recovery is no longer physically possible. Then the connection fails, and the chain linking muscle to movement is instantly erased.
Many victims report hearing a loud pop because the failure is sudden, brutal, and impossible to ignore.
Without the tendon, the kneecap is yanked upward, leaving the leg unable to perform its simplest mission. The knee can no longer extend under load, and standing suddenly becomes a challenge beyond human will. A single torn bridge disconnects one of the most powerful movement systems inside the entire body.
Sometimes chasing what is already out of reach costs the very tool that keeps you standing.
Survival is not always persistence, because knowing when to let go can be the strongest act of all. The real damage becomes visible only after the adrenaline fades and the body reveals what strength can no longer hide. A ruptured tendon often leaves a physical void where a critical connection once carried enormous force. The patellar tendon is not just tissue, because it transfers every command from muscle into movement.
Millions of collagen strands work together, creating remarkable strength through organization rather than sheer size. Every sprint, jump, and cut relies on this hidden structure surviving forces several times body weight. Many ruptures begin long before the final snap, because microscopic damage quietly accumulates over months. Repeated overload creates invisible weaknesses that gradually reduce the tendon's ability to distribute force. Unlike muscle, tendon tissue heals slowly because blood delivery is limited and recovery resources arrive late. What feels like minor soreness can sometimes be the first warning that structural reserves are disappearing.
The body rarely fails without notice, but many signals are dismissed until consequences become unavoidable. Stopping can be more dangerous than accelerating, because braking often generates the highest tendon loads. Complaints. In a fraction of a second, the knee must absorb energy powerful enough to challenge biological limits. The stronger the contraction, the greater the force transmitted directly into the vulnerable attachment site. Failure often occurs where tendon meets bone, because concentrated forces converge at a single location. Once enough fibers fail, remaining strands inherit impossible loads and collapse follows rapidly. Catastrophic rupture is rarely one strand breaking, because it is thousands failing almost simultaneously. The injury lasts seconds, but rebuilding trust in the body can require months of relentless effort.
Major failures often begin as tiny, neglected weaknesses, proving that prevention is always cheaper than repair.
Repair begins where biology failed, because disconnected structures cannot simply will themselves back together. The goal is not merely reconnecting tissue, but restoring the exact pathway of force transmission. Every stitch must survive enormous loads long before the tendon fully regains natural strength. Healing depends on rebuilding an interface where soft tissue and hard bone cooperate seamlessly. Surgery may last hours, but recovery often demands patience measured in seasons.
The first challenge is accepting temporary weakness after years of trusting effortless movement.
Muscle loss begins surprisingly fast when injury removes the mechanical demands that normally preserve strength.
Progress often arrives in millimeters, long before it appears in dramatic, visible breakthroughs. New tissue initially resembles an emergency patch rather than the organized architecture it replaces. Strategic loading teaches healing fibers how to organize themselves for future mechanical demands.
Recovery is often less about heroic moments and more about repeating boring, difficult tasks.
Strength alone is insufficient because movement also depends on rebuilding confidence within the nervous system. Fear often survives long after tissue heals because memory preserves the moment everything failed.
The brain protects itself by remembering danger even when the threat has already passed.
Successful rehabilitation requires restoring function rather than merely eliminating pain.
Each controlled increase in load becomes a test of trust between healing tissue and ambition. Living tissues respond to challenge by becoming stronger when stress arrives within manageable limits. Too little stress weakens tissue, while too much stress destroys it, and mastery lives between extremes.
The comeback journey is often invisible because the hardest battles happen far from applause. A repaired tendon may never forget trauma, yet remarkable function can still return.
Strength is not the absence of damage, because true resilience emerges through adaptation after failure. Injury often teaches lessons that success repeatedly postpones until reality becomes unavoidable. Flexibility frequently outperforms stubbornness because survival favors adaptation over resistance.
Letting go is not surrender when holding on threatens the foundations that support your future.
The body remembers every lesson, and sometimes the greatest victory is learning when not to chase.
The most dangerous injuries often begin with forces the human eye can never directly observe.
Your knee functions like a living transmission system where every link depends on the others.
A chain rarely fails at its strongest point because collapse usually begins where weakness concentrates.
Braking creates hidden loads that can exceed those produced during acceleration and explosive movement. Several powerful forces arrive simultaneously, creating a perfect storm at a surprisingly small attachment site.
Biological tissue rivals engineered materials because nature optimizes strength through layered organization.
Time gradually alters tissue quality, even when outward performance still appears completely normal.
The body remembers every repetition because microscopic consequences accumulate long before symptoms appear.
Persistent irritation is not always weakness, because it may represent a message demanding attention. Many catastrophic injuries are preceded by opportunities to adjust direction before damage becomes irreversible. Stress rarely spreads evenly because certain fibers absorb far more punishment than neighboring structures. Pursuing every opportunity without limits can transform determination into self-inflicted vulnerability.
Even powerful systems possess thresholds, and exceeding them guarantees consequences rather than rewards.
Small adjustments in timing and restraint often prevent failures that appear random from the outside.
Understanding failure transforms pain into information, and information becomes a tool for survival.
Many physical disasters originate from split-second choices made long before tissues reach danger.
Wisdom is not avoiding every storm, because it is recognizing which battles deserve resistance. The strongest competitors are not those who chase everything, but those who choose carefully. Recovery teaches that strength grows not from perfection, but from adaptation after disruption. Knowing when to release the unreachable may protect the very foundation that carries you forward.
The injury was never created by 1 second, because every warning sign had been building quietly beforehand. The final rupture exposed a story written across thousands of repetitions long before the audible snap. The decisive difference was not strength, speed, or talent, but the choice made in 1 instant. Healing succeeds when biology receives time and structure and respect instead of endless demands.
The comeback proves that recovery is possible, but prevention remains infinitely less expensive.
Most people are pulling against hidden pressures just as dangerous as any force inside sport.
In 2026, attention is overloaded, and many lives are failing from constant overextension. People rarely break from one heavy burden, because collapse emerges from accumulated, unresolved strain. The lesson hidden inside tendon rupture is that limits ignored eventually become limits enforced. The strongest decision sometimes appears passive, because wisdom often resembles restraint from the outside. Every biological system survives through adaptation, because survival depends on balance rather than obsession.
Experience becomes valuable only when painful lessons are transformed into guidance for others. Letting go of excess pressure preserves the very structure responsible for carrying future success. In 2026, survival belongs not to those who chase everything, but to those who choose wisely. Remember, the tendon failed when it reached beyond its limits, and people often fail for exactly the same reason.